It is so good to be back with you all today after being immersed in study leave for a couple of weeks, and I do also appreciate that time. And you all maybe have been wondering, what does a UU minister do on Sunday morning when she's not worshiping with her people? Where would she be? How many of you wondered? Yeah. So, last Sunday, a friend and I went in search for the portal to hell. Did you know it's located right here in Pasadena, my friends? It is, and I don't mean the intersection of Lake and California. Our little hometown, known as the City of Roses, made famous by that song, The Little Old Lady in Pasadena, it is also home to an entrance to the underworld. And it's scary. So finding the entrance to the underworld in Pasadena, it's a little bit mysterious, as it should be though, right? I mean, you don't expect that you're gonna see a big arrow and sign that says, this way, a portal to the underworld right over here. So my friend and I knew where to point ourselves at the beginning. You're supposed to start at Devil's Gate Dam. Have you been there? Kesa has. I knew she was gonna nod yes. So you find your way to a cul-de-sac in a lovely little neighborhood in Altadena. You park your car, you get out. There's a sign that says Devil's Gate Dam, and then that's it. You have to somehow steer yourself to this underground portal. And so it's somewhere near the dam. And my friend and I, we got out of our cars and we start walking and we see that sign for the dam and we walk over what we thought was a lovely little bridge. So we stood there for a while and we kind of looked to the south. You can look down into this like leafy, beautiful canyon of the Arroyo. We looked out to the north, and there was JPL and the foothills of the San Gabriel Mountains. And we looked over to the west, and there was this beautiful pathway shaded by this canopy of old oak trees. We didn't even know where the dam was, though. Where are we? Well, come to find out, when you're in that spot that you think is a little bridge, you're actually on top of the dam, which Kesa also knew because she's been there. So there we were, wondering how in the world we're going to find it. And we're sitting there and we're like, this is actually really beautiful. How in the world could we be anywhere near a portal to Styx? And then I was thinking about it, and isn't it that way in our lives some of the times also? That like we're in this maybe beautiful place in our life, or maybe we're kind of like floating along, going from one day to the next, maybe not totally cognizant of what in the world we're doing. Maybe we've gotten a little bit complacent, and then all of a sudden we look up and find ourselves in a strange place, one that we never thought we would find ourselves in. We don't even notice the subtleties of the path we're on until all of a sudden, there it is, we hit our toe on a rock that we didn't realize was right in front of us, or a big boulder comes crashing down above us and we just barely miss it, or heaven forbid, it lands right on top of us. We can feel really bewildered and think, how did I find myself here? And sometimes we're immersed in a really, like, what we find a wonderful and really beautiful life, a little bit like that 1982 song by Crowded House, once in a lifetime. You may find yourself in a big automobile with a beautiful wife and a beautiful home. I ask you, how did I get here? And there's a lot of days I actually ask myself that same question. Oh my God, how did I get here? How did I end up in this life with the beautiful people, feeling really content and satisfied? I might get a little scared. How am I going to hang on to it? We all know that's a spiritual practice, the not really hang on to it. But as much as I feel that way, the other piece of that is that it didn't always feel that way. There's lots of times in my own life where instead of feeling surrounded by beauty and contentment, I felt like every day was one more in a series of unfortunate events. And I'm guessing I'm not alone in that feeling. So many things can lead us to that place where we're kind of surprised to find ourselves surrounded by boulders that we didn't even know were there. Some find their way there through divorce or relationship breakups. Some find themselves there because you've run out of money and you realize you're so deep in debt, you don't know how you're ever going to dig out of it. Some people find themselves there because they realize, oh my God, I cannot get to lunch without having a drink. And how did that happen? And then some just like goofing up time and time again and realizing that you're disappointing the people around you. Realizing in whatever it is that brings you to that place that there's a person that you think you are in here, and yet that's not what's being reflected by those who see you out here. Your inner and outer selves are way out of balance, out of sync. And it's like you're in a different reality, and it's not at all the one you had imagined for yourself. Earlier this week, Melanie and I saw a documentary film, and it's called The Maiden. Have any of you been to the Limley? Yes, Wendy's seen it. Well, I'm not going to tell you all about it, don't worry. But it's a sailing adventure, it's a feminist manifesto, it's a coming-of-age story. Go! This is your PSA for the day. And it focuses on an all-women's crew that is put together to sail this race around the world. And it's the very first all-women crew on a sailboat for a race like this. Do you know what year this was, the very first all-women's crew? You do, and you do. Well, 1989. That's when I graduated from high school, and I just couldn't believe that in 1989 the sailing world was still so male-focused, that this would be the very first all-women crew to do something like this. So the documentary follows their 2 years of preparation to get ready for the race, and then the 9+ months that they were actually out at sea. And the story's told through footage that was taken back in 1989, news footage, people just videoing them, and then footage from today. You get to see the women from the crew and hear them reflecting on that experience and what it did, how it changed their life. Now, the women in 1989, they were in their 20s and 30s, and they could take off for almost a year and live on the open sea. And the head of the all-woman crew, the skipper and navigator, was a woman named Tracy Edwards. And you can imagine that the path in front of her was pretty rocky. There she was at 27 and a woman. She hadn't crewed a lot of boats. I think she had just served as the cook on one. She hadn't been in charge of a whole entire boat before, and she also didn't have millions of dollars in her pocket to fund this adventure. So as she looks back from her vantage point today, she describes everything she was up against. She says, both in preparing and eventually navigating her boat around the world, she names things like, I didn't have money and no one would sponsor me because I was a woman. She needed a boat, and instead of a big fancy boat ready to go, the only one she could afford, it was definitely from the used boat lot. And needed a ton of work, and they panned to the boat, and my heart dropped. How are they ever going to get this boat ready to be 9 months on the open sea? There was all sorts of skepticism that she and her crew faced from the all-male sailing society and from journalists, and they were actually betting on how soon they would bring their boat back into shore. The bets were a month, maybe 2 months, but they certainly wouldn't even finish the first leg of the race. And then all the hardships you can imagine that someone would face 9 months out at sea. She describes it as lurching from one terrible situation to the next. And yet she also says that all of those obstacles created a sense of cohesion among her and her crew that she didn't think would have been possible without everything they had come up against. And so maybe you've realized that also, that all of your lurching around in your life, going from here to there, trying to find a way around those boulders in front of you, have actually served to make you stronger, more resilient. And sometimes those moments are ones where we set out to achieve something that we didn't think was possible, an all-woman crew sailing around the world. But other times, those moments are things I, at least, would just as soon forget ever happened. Hopefully, they're never going to make a documentary about them. The moments in our lives that we come away from and have felt shame about them for the way we showed up. Moments where we helped create instability in someone's life. Moments that we just doubted in ourselves. And my own tendency, I don't want to talk about those. You note that I'm not sharing what they are from the pulpit for a reason. And I don't always want to talk about them with myself, and clearly not with all of you from this vantage point. But really, it's less my not wanting to talk about it, or you perhaps not wanting to talk about it. It's less about not wanting to seem perfect, and it's more just about the discomfort that arises in my own heart and soul as I allow those memories to surface. And not being able to own all of that is a sure way to find yourself in front of that gate leading into a life that you don't really want to be yours to lead, a life that's washed out and faded and not all it can be. At the end of the film, The Maiden, I looked at the woman on the screen, now almost 57, 30 years later, and I wondered, how did she get here? What happened? Because the film ends at the end of the race. And it's like, where's Tracy now? What's she doing? Who is she? And you can Google her on the internet and find out. She did an interview recently on Fresh Air, and she talks about what her life was like immediately following this race. And it wasn't like maybe what some of us would imagine it would be when you had accomplished a big thing. She says she went from the full out intensity of those 3 years of preparing and being in the race to a kind of free fall. She reached a life crisis. She remembers it didn't go all that well. The girls from the crew disappeared quickly, and I fell off a cliff. Within 9 months, I'd had a nervous breakdown. I didn't ask for help. I struggled without my teammates around. They were my family. And I disappeared and became a recluse. And she goes on to describe the shame she felt at that time in her life when, after she had held so much during the race, that now she couldn't even figure out her own way into offering care and concern and nurture for herself. She just let it all kind of fall apart. And now that she's talking about it, reclaiming that and using it for herself, creating some integration, is helping her on her own pathway toward wholeness. Parker Palmer, a Quaker and teacher, writes and speaks a lot about how you and I can create wholeness in our lives. And he says the only way to become whole is to put our arms lovingly around everything we've shown ourselves to be. To put our arms around the times that we have been self-serving and also generous, the times we've been spiteful and also compassionate, the times that we have been cowardly and courageous, the times that we have been treacherous and also trustworthy. We must be able to say to ourselves and to the world that I am all of the above. As Tracy continues to untangle the maze of her own emotions that was her life post-race, she identifies the lessons that she learned from that particular time. To ask for help when she needs it, to not pretend to be brave, and that friendship and teamwork are the two most important things to have in life. She lovingly put her arms around everything she was at that time, and she found her way into becoming fierce with the real reality of her life. Florida Scott Maxwell, who's a 20th century playwright and author, describes that kind of whole life integration. She says, "You need only claim the events of your life to make yourself yours. When you truly possess all that you have been and done, then you are fierce with reality." Fierce with reality. I want to be fierce with the reality of my life. And I wonder, are there parts of your own life that you feel like, it's time I made peace with that? It's time I learn how to lovingly put my arms around some of those memories and parts of me that maybe I haven't been really happy with. And to own that you're so much more than that particular phase in your life. So last Sunday, several wrong turns up at Devil's Gate Dam finally led my friend and I down a curving, descending path into the arroyo. The stream is dry right now. And we looked around and we saw this really weird wooden structure that looked like ropes course. We didn't get on it. Don't get on it if you go. It looks very unsafe. And we finally found it. There's literally a gate. It's full of graffiti. Some of it looks a little bit creepy down there. And behind the gate, it was cracked open a little bit. There's this long, dark tunnel leading surely to somewhere we don't want to go. And as we were deciding, are we going to actually walk in this gate and go to Pasadena's portal of hell? We smelled something. Yeah. It was smoke. And it was coming from the end of the tunnel. It could have been kids. It could have been someone needing a home and roasting marshmallows. It could have been a demon. I am not here to tell that story because she and I looked at each other and said, "Oh, we're getting out of here. We are getting out of here." So wherever you find yourself on the path, going down to go up, approaching heaven via hell, she and I had each other and made a good decision to leave. Remember, the only way through it is through, and as you go, remember the 3 lessons. Ask for help. Be vulnerable in the face of all you may come up against, and you are definitely not alone. Amen. Let us sing with the bravest fire in our heart, creating a little smoke. Is it demon from our bravest fire, or is it our passion? Number 34, and rise as your body and spirit allow.